everyone. Gold star for every one of you who arrived on time. Thanks so much for being here today. Thank you for joining us for DataBytes with the National Consortium for Data Science. My name is Amanda Miller, and I'm the Associate Director for the National Consortium for Data Science, or NCDS. We are thrilled to host Paige Spell and Shaylee Davis from Elder Research today to present Navigating the Data Divide, Approaching Analytics Across Organizational Maturity Levels. Before we begin, I'm going to share a few housekeeping items. We have disabled Zoom Q&A for attendees, and chat is also disabled to allow Paige and Shaylee an opportunity to present without distractions. But don't worry, we do offer a place for you to share your comments and questions. All questions and comments should be uploaded to Easy Retro, which is our crowdsourcing Q&A platform. We're going to go ahead and share the link in Zoom chat now. And in about 40 minutes after the presentation wraps, we'll share instructions and the link once again before we begin Q&A. So there are those of you who will be able to open up this link and figure out how to add questions throughout the presentation, and that is just fine. One of the things we love about this platform is that it is very intuitive and easy to use, and we encourage you to add your questions and comments there throughout the presentation if you are able to do so. If we are not able to address your question during this event, we will do our best to address it during our in our wrap-up materials that we'll send out with the recording within the next week or so. So without further delay, it's my pleasure to welcome Paige Spell and Shaylee Davis. Thanks so much for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us. Okay, as you all probably saw and what grabbed your attention when you wanted to join this webinar was that we're going to be talking about navigating the data divide and discussing our experiences working with different organizations at different stages of analytical maturity and sort of how it affects the direction and implementation of various analytical projects. But first, we'll start with an introduction. I'm Paige Spell, and I am co-presenting with Shaylee Davis. We are both data scientists at Elder Research. Elder Research is an analytics consulting firm made up of about 150 data scientists, data engineers, and support staff. We have clients in the public and private sectors. However, both of us work in the public sector in a magnitude of industries. That could be consumer packaged goods, that could be hospitality, healthcare, insurance, you name it, our team has had their hands in it. We've been at Elder Research for almost 3 years. We actually started within a few weeks of each other, so that's kind of fun. We got to experience a lot together, but while we've been on the same team, we've actually experienced a lot of differences. And so we wanted to have the opportunity to share those differences and our unique experiences. This is sort of what brought us here today to share how analytics isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. So I'll just run through a quick agenda. First, we're going to talk about how analytics is present within an organization and how it sort of differs across organizations, really defining what analytical maturity is. Then I'll start with giving you some, advice on my personal experience working with an organization that's analytically emerging. And we'll sort of get a next level flavor when Shaylee talks about how she's been working to enhance analytics within an organization that's already pretty analytically mature. And then lastly, we will just sort of give you some advice to drive analytics forward given these scenarios and how you can contribute yourself. So I know all those words probably already got you thinking about questions. What are they talking about? Well, here's some questions that might have come to mind. We're going to talk about how you identify analytics maturity in an organization and how you can continue to advance your analytics within an organization. We'll talk about what some challenges are when you're trying to adopt analytics, and also what's made people successful and how to drive meaningful um, outcomes. So the first question I'm sure everyone has is, what is analytical maturity? You all probably have this idea of what analytics is. You hear it, you're either a student working in it, you already have a job diving into analytics. And so what comes to your mind? When you think of analytical maturity, you might think of data, right? Probably 5, 10 years ago, all this data just started popping up in organizations and they didn't know what to do with it. Well, then they started building dashboards. So you probably think of dashboards and how maybe internally businesses are communicating their data findings through Power BI and Tableau and different sorts of visualizations. And then building those dashboards programmatically. You think of data scientists, you might think of how they're coding, they're creating these cool models, they're doing all this behind the scenes work to promote analytics. And that kind of work is going up the chain to provide insights to these business performance metrics. So how leadership are using different acronyms like ROI and KPI, and analytics is really driving the behind the scenes metrics.
All right. And one way we can talk about analytical maturity is discussing how deeply data-driven decision-making is embedded within an organization. So to talk about the different layers of maturity, we'll start from the beginning with a baseline and then work our way up. So the most basic level of data usage an organization can conduct is utilizing data for descriptive analytics. So in descriptive analytics, the primary objective is to answer the question, what happened? So descriptive analytics is going to be looking backwards. It's here where we summarize raw data into interpretable formats like reports, charts, dashboards. In an organization that focuses primarily on descriptive analytics, data often exists in silos, with different departments using their own systems and their own data sets, so there's limited data integration, which means that data from one department, such as sales, may not easily combine with data from another department, such as marketing. Reports and visualizations are often created manually using tools like Excel, Power BI, Tableau, as opposed to automated reporting. So some of these reports may be generated monthly or quarterly, but there's less focus on real-time data. It's often focused on basic performance metrics and key performance indicators, those KPIs we're looking for. These reports often provide a simple snapshot of what has already occurred, such as sales by month, customer satisfaction ratings, or operational expenses. While descriptive analytics is incredibly important, there are other ways we can utilize data to drive our organization forward. Descriptive analytics helps answer questions like how much revenue did we generate last quarter, but doesn't provide insight into why the revenue changed or how we could improve it. Decision-making in this stage is going to be largely reactive and based on past data, with limited strategic guidance on future actions. So our next level of maturity we might be at is using data for diagnostic purposes. It's in this level that we're asking why. We're using root cause analysis to investigate deeper layers of data. We might be looking for different correlations, segmentations, and patterns. Organizations may begin integrating data from different departments and systems to gain a more holistic view of a problem. Cross-functional collaboration becomes more apparent as the different business units relied on shared insights. While organizations in the diagnostic maturity level may still rely on reports and dashboards, they incorporate more drill-down capabilities that allow users to explore data at more granular levels. They may use techniques like correlation analysis, or time series decomposition, or cohort analysis to investigate these relationships. They may still have the the dashboarding tools and SQL queries, but they may become a little bit more advanced to help go beyond just the surface level summaries. This way, they are able to recognize patterns and trends in the data that may not be immediately obvious. So for example, you could uncover anomalies. Are we identifying periods of unusually high or low performance? And then perhaps we can attribute it to some specific factors, such as a sales promotion, seasonality, is it close to Christmas? Are we in a lull period? Customer behaviors, and other things. Diagnostic and analytics helps decision-making become more data-informed. You can be slightly more proactive instead of reactive once you understand the drivers of past outcomes, and then we can start addressing some root causes. However, while organizations start making decisions based on data, those decisions are still somewhat retrospective, and it still focuses on why certain things happened rather than on predicting future outcomes. So our next level of maturity is going to be using data for predictive purposes. Organizations that use predictive analytics, they have advanced beyond simply understanding what happened and why it happened, and we can begin to focus on what is likely to happen in the future. This stage might be more in line with how you envision analytics being used within companies. Um, Predictive analytics involves using historical data, statistical models, machine learning algorithms, and sometimes external data to forecast future events or trends, enabling organizations to anticipate outcomes and make more proactive, data-driven decisions. They're thinking about questions like what will happen next, or what is likely to occur under different scenarios. These predictive models can help provide insights so organizations can make more informed decisions for their future efforts. Predictive analytics shifts organizations from reactive decision-making to proactive forward-looking strategies. Leaders will rely on some predictive insights to make decisions that will impact future performance. For example, if a predictive model forecasts a downturn in sales, an organization might preemptively adjust marketing strategies or inventory levels to mitigate the impact. In this stage of analytics maturity, organizations are employing statistical and ML models, regressions, time series classification, and clustering. Data scientists are using tools like Python and R, maybe SAS. Our data is going to be more integrated. Instead of having local data stored to someone's computer who's in sales and someone's computer who's in marketing, now we have a robust infrastructure, something like a data warehouse or a data lake or some other cloud-based platform where everybody can access the data. This helps data from multiple data sources exist in one place, so we are less siloed, and that helps us build a more data-driven culture. And then finally, we'll talk about prescriptive analytics. If you're operating in this stage of analytics maturity, we have advanced beyond merely predicting future outcomes to determining the best course of action based on those predictions. So not only are we answering the question, what will happen, but what should we do about it? This stage involves advanced techniques such as optimization algorithms, decision models, simulation, and machine learning to provide recommendations for optimal decision making. The focus is on guiding decision makers with suggestions or strategies that lead to the best possible outcomes. These recommendations are often automated and can be directly integrated into the workflows, allowing organizations to make real-time decisions based on prescriptive models. So some techniques we use could be optimization. So perhaps we want to use optimization models to maximize or minimize certain outcomes, such as profits, cost, resource usage, or operational efficiency. For example, a supply chain optimization model might recommend the best combination of suppliers, shipping routes, and inventory levels to minimize cost while maintaining service levels. They can also utilize simulations. Organizations use simulations to test different scenarios and understand the potential impact of various decisions. By running multiple simulations under different conditions, such as fluctuating demand, supply chain disruptions, decision makers can evaluate the risks and rewards of various strategies before implementing them. In advanced machine learning, we can use algorithms to predict outcomes and suggest our optimal actions. An example of this could be utilizing reinforcement learning. So we learn the best actions based on trial and error, and recommendation systems can also help provide tailored suggestions to users based on their past behaviors and patterns. Many decisions are going to be automated at this level. For example, supply chain decisions about inventory levels, reordering points, and shipping routes can be made in real time based on optimization models without human intervention. This allows organizations to operate more efficiently and reduce the risk of human error in decision making. The same tools and setup from predictive analytics are still present in this stage, just amplified. So we're still using Python, R, we're still using cloud platforms for our data such as AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, and we still have the infrastructure to help us with that data processing, model building, and real-time decision making. Similar to predictive analytics, again, we're going to the maturity where we have more collaboration across departments. So perhaps it's data science working with operations and finance and marketing. Organizations often form cross-functional teams to design, test, and implement prescriptive models that benefit the entire organization. So we're going to discuss how is analytics embedded within an organization and what is the practical difference. We can discover where we are in the progression of maturity in organizations by asking a few questions. What are we primarily using data for? So we've kind of walked through the 4 stages. What is our primary usage within this organization? How standardized is usage across the organization? And how does this affect our ability to implement analytical solutions? With these questions, we can start to assess if an organization is at low maturity, high maturity, or somewhere in between.
So while Shaylee went through some of the kind of 4 high-level stages you could try and bucket organizations into, we're only going to be focusing on our specific experience. So first, we'll be talking about developing capabilities within an emerging organization. And then Shaylee's going to touch on enhancing analytics with an already pretty mature analytical organization. But first, I'll dive into my particular experience with a company that's currently in this emerging stage on their analytics journey. So when I refer to an organization as emerging in their analytics journey, I think of them being somewhere between this like diagnostic and prescriptive stage, maybe even more so closer to the predictive stage. They're transitioning from backward looking, only focusing on historical data, and they're trying to be more forward looking and making data driven decisions. So you can imagine that half the organization is still stuck in the world of sending spreadsheets to each other via email and maybe just viewing dashboards on a regular basis, while the other half is developing forecasts and they're making real-time data-driven decisions. And as you imagine, since I work for an analytics consulting firm, we were brought in to help advance their current analytics process. Specifically, some of the work we have contributed the most on is building out their data infrastructure. So certain data being siloed in those specific teams, like Shaylee mentioned, you might have data in sales that might not match up to data in marketing, and we're all just sort of hoarding our own information. But now we've helped develop this centralized location and put a process in place so that teams across the organization can access data, and that we can share and progress together. There's still work to be done on this. A lot of teams still survive on manually generating and sending out spreadsheets, but this is a great step forward. While that was a huge data engineering effort, some data science projects that we've worked on have been developing forecasting algorithms that give executives real-time risk evaluation, generating multiple optimization models to help with resource allocation or improve operational efficiency. And all of these created by engaging different parts of the business to address those specific needs and drive adoption. And when an organization is going through this transition where they're trying to adopt analytics, it's not uncommon to run into many challenges along the way. Especially with bigger organizations, you're going to have, more people to bring along and more resistance when that happens. And analytics is not a one size fits all. And adoption across organizations, it's going to happen differently, and everyone's going to have their unique challenges. So you're going to have to work on each unique case and apply to their specific business needs. While the technologies and models and analytics behind the scenes may not be foundationally different, the application, the features, and the focus will all change. And so if you're like me and you went to school for math and you've studied analytics and you've just been immersed in this world of data science, you kind of have to step back and you have to understand that this is new for a lot of people, that we're now, in this data-driven world, and these processes are not what other people learned when they went to school. And so it may change their everyday workflow, and it's not always straightforward. But we have to ensure that these analytics efforts are tied with specific goals, with their priorities for various departments. We're sort of there to help create this culture of teamwork between the data professionals and the business teams. And navigating this transition from diagnostic to predictive analytics requires overcoming technical challenges, cultural and operational challenges. So I think one of the most important parts of analytics is understanding the business. Your analytics tools might be really cool and your models might be really advanced, but they're not going to be used if the ones implementing them or the people that they're built for don't understand it. The key to unlocking value of analytics lies in making sure that data and insights are relevant, that they're understandable, and that they're actionable for the business and those end users. That's your job. Your job is not only to just create these cool analytics that are super advanced, but to also connect it to the business. And bridging the gap between these technical capabilities that you're developing and these operational realities of business teams is really hard, and it definitely takes a long way before people really start to adopt it. So it's crucial to ensure that the business needs and the goals are understood, that you're aligning your analytics efforts with the business priorities, whether it's improving operational efficiency, increasing revenue, everyone wants more money, or just reducing risks. Analytics teams should work closely with those business stakeholders to define the right questions that can be answered by the data. And education goes both ways. So it's not just educating the end user with some analytics tool you created, but for you to be successful, you need to understand the business application at hand. Data-driven insights, they're only valuable when they're contextualized within the user-specific business environment, and how it relates to their role. Many end users may not be familiar with interpreting data or using these tools, and so training them is essential to help them understand, but you have to meet them where they are. You have to help maybe teach them how to read and interpret dashboards, or what specific visualizations and reports are saying. Summary statistics that may be foundational and intuitive to you may not be to everyone else. So don't assume people know. Take the time to explain your insights and really translate it from the analytics you're doing to, okay, how does this number apply to what they need to hear? And translating those insights into actionable decisions within their role is how you're going to help them want to adopt your product anyway. And lastly, when we're trying to bridge that gap between analytics and business end users, you need to collaborate, you need to talk. And implementing, an agile approach to analytics development, it does encourage that flexibility and responsiveness to business needs. You want to involve the stakeholder throughout the analytics lifecycle, not just start and finish. You want their input throughout it. This is an iterative process. So maybe you develop this initial version of your analytics tool, your model, whatever, and then you get the user to review it. You get their input for this, like, hey, I use these features, like, does that align with your gut feeling? have regular check-ins, update them on your progress. You want their buy-in, like you want them invested just as much as you, and you want them to understand it. So it's an iterative process. Communicate all the time, and may not always be easy, but definitely try and foster that kind of culture. And like I said, gaining user buy-in is a significant challenge that can hinder the adoption of analytics within an organization. Without the support of your stakeholders or like key leadership, whether it's executives, department heads, or just, the end users of your product, the potential of analytics to be meaningful, it may be underutilized, and resistance to analytics adoption can happen for many reasons. One reason might just be some users may not fully understand the value or the role analytics can play in their decision-making process. They might view it as like some unnecessary layer of complexity rather than a tool to enhance their work. They, they just need like clear educational efforts to help them see that analytics can solve some of your pain points. Like maybe you're developing a spreadsheet over and over each month to get those sales numbers, when analytics can help automate that process for you. And your job would be, go over and check and be sure that like this makes sense for this month. If it's Christmas, maybe we do expect more sales. So data should be framed in the business terms rather than like your technical insight. Like they may not understand, so put it in their terms. And also, we're all human, so people might just be resistant to change, and that happens. People may think that analytics are going to take their job, or it's going to threaten, their current role. And, valid, like it's okay to think that, but it's your job to help them understand that we're really building this tool to make their job easier. Their expertise and their, gut feeling is still important on top of the actual math and stuff going on behind the scenes. Predictive models and automation systems, they can perform tasks that were traditionally done by hand, like forecasting sales, optimizing schedules, or, making operational decisions. And employees who are like unfamiliar with these tools may view it as a competitor of what they've been doing for the past 15 years. But again, it's crucial to communicate that analytics is not intended to replace people, but it's there to enhance their capabilities. Think of all the time that we just saved you that you can do X, Y, and Z with now. And yeah, it is kind of on leadership to help emphasize that analytics culture, but it takes time and it takes positive experiences with analytics. So fear of change and job impact is a natural human reaction, but address those concerns and be transparent when you're communicating your results, and give clear examples of how it can enhance their work and not replace it. And lastly, stakeholders who have had bad experiences with analytics in the past, whether it's due to poorly implemented projects, inaccurate data, unclear insights, they're going to be skeptical working with people of analytics in the future. Maybe, previous work was oversold, big promises of great results, and then, maybe stakeholders felt misled because it's not what they were intending. And even, people may feel alienated. They may not understand how to use a tool. And so they don't want to use it. They're resistant to that. It's really, whether it's data, whatever it is, start by recognizing and addressing that, yeah, you've had bad experiences in the past, and that's okay. But build to regain their trust and build to have, that buy-in by delivering maybe small, quick wins that demonstrate like that immediate value of analytics. Start with projects that are clear, measurable, and benefit, maybe the person of interest. By having these early success stories, you can overcome skepticism little by little. People like to see actual results that are, tangible and meaningful to them, and that's going to help you build momentum. So stakeholders who've been burned in the past, they'll be more open to analytics as you're more open with your process, as you're more open with, helping align with their goals. So just think about that as you, work on your next project, that you just have to be clear, and you have to actively seek their input and feedback throughout this development and implementation, process. And I think the word we're looking for when we communicate and talk to these stakeholders is transparency. And transparency is the key for building trust and driving successful adoption. It helps sort of demystify these analytics by clearly explaining how the data was collected, how you're analyzing it. Maybe you're sharing the methodologies. Some people care, some people don't care, and that's okay. But make sure to explain these are the assumptions we're making given all this that we're dealing with. But it helps build confidence, and it helps the stakeholders see the value and practicality of these, data-driven insights. So be open about the data you collected, be open about why it's being used, get, their input on, hey, does this feature make sense? Yeah, just provide the time to like regularly check in with your stakeholder, and get them on board with the decisions you're making. And communicate early. So like I've said, make the time to talk to them. Don't just do it at the end of your project when you want their feedback because you're done. It's an iterative process, and you're going to build upon it. They're going to change their mind. You're going to realize maybe something doesn't hold up. And it's just important to start early and to start often when you're communicating with your end user. And lastly, acknowledge previous issues. Be transparent. Like, hey, I know you were burned in the past. We're here to like help, and here's what we're planning to do. Really, have well thought out discussions and set realistic expectations of what analytics can and cannot do. It is okay to say, hey, what you want is not actually practical and what we can do. Because a lot of times they just don't know. But being transparent, it really fosters trust, and it does reduce resistance, and it makes the users feel involved. And that's going to help build the confidence and drive successful adoption when we're starting these analytics initiatives. And we think of all these challenges, and we think of, organizations that are trying to grow, and they're emerging in this analytics maturity journey, but they're changing too. As an organization becomes more data driven, maybe the end users change, their assumptions about things change. We're human, we change our mind. So this process of driving analytics maturity is going to evolve. And so that might just require you to constantly reevaluate how the data is being presented, how it's being processed, ensuring that your assumptions behind the analytics models, that they remain relevant and useful to the end user. Maybe your end user changed. Hey, do you agree with what so-and-so said last year? So yeah, you want the user base and their needs, they're not going to be stagnant, and you want organizations to continuously adapt because that's just part of this growing process. And while there are a lot of challenges when it comes to analytics adoption for an organization who is emerging in their analytics journey, it is helpful to balance tangible wins with long-term success. So, it felt like I was saying all these negative things like, oh man, you're really going to have to convince people to love your product or whatever and like get on board. But it helps to gain user buy-in, and it helps to talk to people when you can create these tangible results, whether it's, these visible results that really help build momentum so that people get on board. You can think about low-hanging fruit, such as some specific business problems like automating a process, like I said before, or making the company more money. Who doesn't love that? Like, hey, if you, cut down on this expense, you're gonna save so much money. Improving customer satisfaction, it's helpful when stakeholders can quickly see and relate to the result of a project. They'll appreciate it more, and it'll just help kind of build that momentum and gain the trust. While these are important, you do have to balance it with the long-term success. So in my particular client and experience, it's nice to see these quick wins because people want to keep working with you, and that's great. But they're growing. They're wanting to strive to be this prescriptive type of maturity level. And so you don't want to lose sight of the goal for long-term adoption. It's important to put time in now to build this framework that's going to have a more long-term impact. This might be investing in that data infrastructure, creating data governance. So really documenting where things are coming from and who's in charge of it. And this helps so that processes are supported as the organization scales up. So the goal as we grow our analytics is that we're going to have more data. We're going to have all, more everything. And we need to be able to scale with the organization. So just ensure that these quick wins align with the broader organizational objectives. So creating, a more cohesive environment with their strategies and the analytics to help get to their, business objectives. And that's going to help create and promote that analytics driven culture by involving the team members and fostering ownership and commitment to improving. So I know I just said a ton of words. If you don't remember anything I said in that entire time, remember these 3 things. If you want to help as this organization is emerging, or if you want to benefit in your work, bridge the gap between analytics and business. Be the one that's the in-between. Talk both languages. Gain user buy-in. By speaking that language of the business and analytics, people are going to want to continue to work with you because they see that the impact. But to do that, you're going to have to be transparent. To get people to buy your product, to get people to buy into what you're doing, you have to tell them, you have to be open, you have to iterate over everything you're doing. So that is it for my personal experience working, in a culture that is sort of evolving and it's emerging. And I'll hand it off to Shaylee to talk about her experience.
Thank you, Paige. In an analytically established organization, what we'll see there is that we often have a specific framework in which we can operate to carry out our analytic projects. This allows us to enhance the organization more easily with analytical solutions. So in my experience working with a more analytically mature organization, the types of projects we're doing and the solutions we're finding can be similar to those that Paige has mentioned working on. But you'll find that there's a different set of challenges and benefits within this type of organization. When we're working with these clients, we can reap the benefits of an established tech stack and established set of protocols. We have more standardized access to data and a map to get our completed project out to the correct audience. While descriptive and diagnostic analytics are still important, and we use them even within our more advanced modeling solutions, this organizational standardization allows us to be able to build more predictive models, more forecasts, experiment with synthetic data, work with generative AI, and just be able to do more with analytical learning. We just are given those supports, and this support can help us reduce the delay in getting our projects out of the door and fully adopted so that they are useful to the actual organization in whatever business need we are trying to meet. So often in a mature company where we are handling the descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, we can see a certain framework that helps the company move towards having more analytics embedded throughout their ecosystem. And so often in a mature company, we can see that analytics already has buy-in and it's ingrained in the culture. But that doesn't mean we take it for granted. Just like Paige mentioned, you still try to foster that collaboration and make sure we're all on the same page and we're addressing any issues as they come. Which we also can see that with this ingrained culture, it's evidenced by the fact that we have frameworks for deployment, our data is more readily accessible. In the company I've worked with, I've noticed some signs of their maturity in that they're collaborative in project design. They have a well-integrated data infrastructure. They have robust testing culture. They have capabilities for deployment, and they have great capabilities for maintenance. So in other words, they are built in a way that makes enhancing their operations with analytical decisions even easier. So with this established buy-in, we can see it leads to better collaboration. So we can collaborate on defining the problem set. We have a good idea on what they might want to be solving for. Perhaps they're wanting to predict how long a customer will have to wait for a certain product, or they want to forecast how much demand they'll need to supply for. As we begin exploration and finding what we can and cannot do with the data, they have a great ability to make sure we're meeting the business needs within our constraints. So for example, in one project, we collaborated on how we want to present wait times to the customer. Did we want to give the customers a simple point estimate, such as we'll ship something to your home in 2 days? Or did we want to give them a range? Your product is going to arrive in 3 to 5 days. We're able to collaborate in the cross-department frame in discussing the pros and cons of each and what best fits the root business problem we are trying to solve. We're able to understand and resolve roadblocks. So an example of a roadblock I've experienced that we needed to collaborate to find a solution to is acquiring the right data. It's great that we live in a world filled with data, but sometimes it's not quite what we need. So even though the data is more readily accessible and is stored in a unified catalog, it might not meet our needs. So we need to find what we can do with the data available. If we're trying to implement a real-time solution, but we don't have real-time data available for our project, what team can we work with? Is this something we can gain access to later if it's not established now? Or maybe there is some real-time data, but we can only get certain features in real time, such as how many orders are currently in the queue, but we're not able to see how long each customer is waiting in the queue. So we work together on resolving if we're able to deliver the solution we need with the limited data, or if we're even able to establish new data for those needs. Much like Paige said, this is a big thing. We always want to iterate. We need that transparent communication so that we're able to iterate and change and tweak things to make this a tool that is useful for the business. Because again, that is our end goal. We want something that isn't just cool and is the most advanced modeling technique. We want something that is useful and we can get buy-in. So being in a more mature organization, we are able to iterate and change things a little bit more quickly. And we're able to begin that testing and those enhancement iterations as needed throughout the project lifecycle. Bringing up testing, often you'll see a more established testing culture. So for example, in my experience, we created a model that predicted how long a customer would wait for their product and presented that range to the customers via the web. Before we rolled this new feature out to every single user of their web application, we had a predetermined set of locations that were willing to test out the new features and get that data on performance. So with this testing framework in place, we were able to find and tweak any issues that may or may not arise before a chain-wide rollout. I've also noticed since we do have these safeguards in place, we are less risk adverse. So we're more willing to implement A/B testing or testing a subset of the user demographic. They have an understanding that sometimes getting the minimum viable product out is sometimes our best bet. So we're able to know what is working well and what our next step in enhancement can lie. Often in a more mature organization, you'll see they've kind of built out the framework. And like Paige said, when we begin enhancing, we want to make sure it's scalable. And so often you'll see dedicated support teams. And so we are doing less descriptive and diagnostic works. We're more focused on being able to deploy different analytical solutions that might be more prescriptive or predictive. So an example of support teams we have is for computing and data access. They have a nice ticketing system in place where you can get maybe AWS accounts for computing purposes. We can get permissions to different data schemas within their unified data lake. And we can get access to a whole host of other tools via an organized ticketing system, however they set that up. And that can help reduce the operational drag in getting access to analytics. For deployments, we have teams, documentation, and structures to get our analytic project present within the organization. We have different tools for monitoring and different ways to get alerts reported to us. We can get alerts sent to Slack, email, a ticket. And there's specific teams in place who get those alerts as well to resolve different issues that may be less related to the model and more related to compute issues. They have these teams for maintenance. One example is when our client in the past changed the orchestrator they were using. So for example, maybe they moved from Airflow to AWS or Databricks. They had teams in place to refactor the code for this orchestration to get the model deployed and working. And they were able to keep functionality throughout this transition. And again, if we are working on any of these, there is a plethora of documentation, and there's even toy demos of some of the tools they use. Everything isn't all butterflies and rainbows. There are potential challenges that are going to arise even in an established culture. So some challenges that may arise are less flexibility. It's great that we have that framework and set to help us get our projects out the door, but maybe you're someone who enjoys finding the best tool to automate with, and you prefer deploying with Docker instead of Airflow. So you have a little less freedom to make those decisions, but it also frees you up to work on your project. Another issue can be more voices. We talked about trying to get the teams all together, and sometimes due to that cross-functional nature, it can be hard to make sure we're meeting the needs of the majority, and that different teams may have different considerations that they really want to focus on. It's their pet project, and you need to be able to whittle the problem statement down to something that is most aligned with the, high priority business use case, and keeping that primary purpose at the front of mind. Access to the data is great, but maybe there are a lot of people with access to the data and they have great things. Again, like maybe they want to model different predictions. And two people from two different teams are building the same thing without any communication. So maybe we're reinventing the wheel and we could really be working together. Love the framework in place, but again, when is it maybe not working for us? It needs to be updated. So an organization has a tricky balance. They need to make sure they're not always chasing the latest and greatest, but since we're all operating under unified tooling, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our organization but still aren't becoming stagnant. So the organization I work with, I think, does a great job of updating when necessary, but they're not in a constant state of upheaval. So in conclusion, for driving analytics forward within this type of organization, we want to make sure we're taking advantage of their current frameworks. We're able to get things in production and focus on that project more and less on creating everything from scratch. Because of this, we can work on more advanced solutioning and have fewer details and roadblocks to work through. And even just like in the less mature, iterate, iterate, iterate. We want to make sure we're collaborating and we are meeting the needs that are presented to us. And we want to make sure that we're encouraging growth versus stagnation. And so those are just two examples. And this is our summary. I'll let you take it away, Paige.
Thanks, Shaylee. So a lot of the things we said had some overlap regardless of the maturity level of the organization that we've worked with. I think it's important when you're at your company, if you're going to a new company, whatever it may be, that you assess that analytics maturity level. And it's going to help you identify how you can contribute, how you should communicate with the stakeholders. Do they already know sort of the analytics at hand, or are you going to have to get people up to speed and like have maybe more collaboration between yourself and the end user? And fostering culture of innovation, regardless of the analytical stage that your organization is in, it's important to continuously, mature and also contribute based on how you're interacting and the products that you're providing, but you want to continue to update those analytics as you go along. And as you're contributing these analytics, be transparent, let people, the stakeholders have input, and that's going to help them have buy-in. And maybe if the framework's not working, at least there's transparency in how they're evaluating the different models and things like that. So Thank you for joining us today with our talk. We hope that it was beneficial, and we will, I guess, be going to Q&A now. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, you guys. That was really insightful and pretty exciting stuff. And it looks like we have a few questions here to address in our remaining time together. We have just dropped the link for the Easy Retro board into the chat, and I want to walk with you, make sure everyone knows how to utilize this board. So in order to add ideas, click on the plus sign in the relevant column and type your idea. When you're finished, you're going to hit the blue box with a thin little white check mark and save within the same field. And then your idea is going to appear on the screen for the public's reaction. So pretty straightforward. And then you can also note how you can upvote someone else's idea using the thumbs up icon and comment on another idea using a quote bubble icon. So thanks, Leah, for demonstrating that for us now. And with that said, if you have any issues, feel free to Slack your questions to myself or to NCDS Media, Zoom chat your questions, excuse me, and we'll be happy to address those, and we can post them on your behalf if you're having any issues. But to get us started, I'm going to begin with the items that have upvotes. So let's take a look at this miscellaneous question here. What do you think about career progression if you go to an established versus an emerging analytic org? Is there a better opportunity for one versus the other?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. And I think it really kind of depends on where you're at in your career in your analytics stage. So, like I had mentioned, having that framework is so nice at an established organization, but it's also kind of a double-edged sword. Maybe you are someone who likes the challenge of like, hey, I found the data, I built the model, and I'm writing all of the coding to get it, out the door and deployed. And I'm working on finding the best way to do maintenance. And maybe that's a challenge you're interested in. Or maybe you're early on in your career and you just want, hey, this is a real structured, nice way to look at things. I know where to find what I need. And again, it's not, sometimes there's an issue of too much documentation. It's hard to find what you need. So I'm not saying it's all rainbows there, but it really, I think, just depends on preference. Maybe you like the challenge of getting things set up, like Paige talked about, like you're having to get that buy-in and you're trying to recommend things that can work at scale. So I don't know if you have thoughts, Paige.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to probably just look at these next couple of items in the enhancing analytics established maturity column here, folks. So let's look at the first item. What tools or frameworks do organizations use to push their analytics further, given they are already mature?
Yeah, I can take that one too. I think that, there's always room for continuous learning, continuous improvement. And so just one example I can think of is like we talked about, we don't want to just have a bunch of Excel documents saved to people's local folders. And we're like constantly emailing, asking for access to this data. So eventually, maybe we get to data lake, maybe we store it in Redshift. And so for mature organizations, they might have that, but then they also might have like data stored more than just like in Azure. Maybe it's also in this data lake or this Redshift, and they have to figure out like, there's different ways to access the different ones. So then maybe they decide to simplify it to just one. So they generally have good data frameworks in place, but there's always, tweaking and improvement.
That's helpful. Paige, is there a question on here that you want to tackle? Or let me rephrase that. Do you want to choose a question to respond to before we wrap up?
Sure. I can pick a question since Shaylee's so generously answered already. So I like the question on, I guess, how do you manage projects that might be more mature than the organization as a whole? Maybe a few employees pushing the envelope forward. Is this problematic? We've definitely experienced this with, where I've been able to work. And I think it depends on who's pushing the envelope forward. A lot of times, you have people who see the value of analytics and they want to do these really cool projects that benefit a lot. And it might be leadership pushing it, but the end users may not be as well versed or may not be as willing to adapt. One example, when I talked about, developing forecasting that evaluates, real-time risk, that was for leadership and that was great. And they were bought in and they were like, this is great. We can see how we're going to be affected, next quarter by changing X, Y, and Z. But it's great when leadership agrees because they're the one fronting the bill and paying and making decisions. But it's harder when you have maybe end users of specific departments that they are part of the operations and they maybe don't want your product. And a lot of the times in consulting, it is not just doing the analytics; it is managing the people that you're working with. And yeah, sometimes it's just they have a sour taste in their mouth, and that's okay. We're still, have to kind of go through this project, but I think it's important that you develop a product that they trust and that, hopefully by the end they want to continue to work with you, but that's not always the case. So it just depends on who it is, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much to both of you. I really appreciate this loan from Elder Research. You guys have been so amazing. Paige was also a panelist at our spring career panel. Maybe we can recruit Shaylee to participate on an upcoming career panel as well. We have a lot of great programs that take place at the National Consortium for Data Science throughout the year. Many of them are free, and I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter at datascienceconsortium.org so you can stay on top of all of those upskilling opportunities and career opportunities that we are pushing out into the interwebs. Thanks so much for being here today, everyone. It's been a pleasure to learn with Paige and Shaylee. Elder, thanks so much for providing these incredible speakers and this content.